I call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. Mr Chair, I'm delighted to take a call on Clause 5 of this particular piece of legislation, which of course is David Bennett's proudest accomplishment in his tenure as the Member of Parliament for Hamilton East. His final months as the Member of Parliament for Hamilton East. He wants this passed before the election so that he can go out there and have something to say to the people of Hamilton East that he's actually achieved in the 5 years that he's been a Member of Parliament. He's got to have something, so he wants this particular piece of legislation to be passed. Mr Chair, this particular clause, Clause 5 of this Act, deals with the land freed of the trusts from the late George Parr, and the last will and testament and the conditions imposed around that by the will of the late George Parr. Now, I've been very interested to read the biography of Mr Parr and some of the facts about it, but I've also been interested to read some of the history of the land itself, of course. Now, I've been interested that there's been no contribution from the Māori Party, from Tauhenari, Miss Parata, Simon Bridges, because reading through this, I've discovered this is confiscated land. This was Tainui land, and it was confiscated land, and I'm surprised that the Māori members on the other side of the House have absolutely nothing to say about it at the moment. Have absolutely nothing to say about it at all. It was confiscated land. Now, it changed ownership several times before it was bought by Mr George Parr, who of course later put it into trust for the benefit of all of the people of Hamilton. But I'm surprised that Mr Henare, he's got a lot, he's been barracking and shouting a lot. He could have taken a call rather than actually moving a closure motion. He seems to have an awful lot that he wants to say. He's got an awful lot that he wants to say about it. He's getting himself very, very worked up over there, and I'm surprised that he's not keen to take a call and actually have a say on it. Mr Chair, I think the Parliament needs to be very cautious when we are passing any legislation that potentially overrides somebody's last will and testament. Because it's something, and it's probably the second time, I think, in the time that I've been in Parliament that I've been involved in a debate on a piece of legislation that does that. The first was Christ's College, some legislation around Christ's College and freeing up money that was in trusts around that. This is the second piece of legislation. I think we need to be really careful about that, because I think when people leave money behind, or leave assets or land or anything behind, we need to be very careful that we don't override their last wishes in investing that land and giving that land or in placing it in trust. So this land was placed in trust. We need to be very careful that what we do with this piece of legislation is consistent, totally consistent with the objectives that Mr George Parr had when he set this land aside. Now, I sat through some of the Select Committee proceedings on this piece of legislation. Not all of them, but I sat through some of the proceedings on this, and I wanted to be satisfied that in fact his last wishes were being respected. Now, overall, this is a very serious matter, Mr Bridges, and I care about making sure that people's last will and testaments are respected. And so I sat through, and I was ultimately satisfied that his last will and his last wishes were being adequately dealt with by this piece of legislation, and that's one of the reasons why I'm going to be supporting it. But I think it's important that we take the time to consider what those wishes were, to consider what his motivations were in setting this land aside, because that's going to be particularly relevant when we come to the next the next clause of this bill, which is around what sort of reserve it should be. And we're going to be debating that under Clause 6. There's still 4 more clauses to go after this one, Mr Henare. So he's just going to have to, he can just knuckle down and look forward to it, I'm sure. But Mr Chair, I think considering George Parr was a very active member of the community, a very active member of the community, from what I can see from the biography, from a very active family within the community, clearly very community focused, wanting to. No, I didn't know him. But I'm sure, given his advanced years, Mr Henare went to school with him. But Mr Chair, clearly very community focused and community active, and I'm sure that would have been part of his consideration when he vested this land into his trust, so that all Hamiltonians could enjoy it and could benefit from that. And we need to make sure that we are being. He was a Rotarian. There's a Rotarian in Hamilton, and I have a lot of respect for Rotarians, and so. And so I think we... What was that?
Chair. Chair.
Call the Honourable David Carter.